NAMM 2020, I'm here on the booth of Cubit Electronix with Andrew. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Fine. A bit hurried already, but yeah, it's NAMM show.
It's NAMM.
Cubit Electronix is a company from?
We are based in San Clemente, California.
Okay. And I think you have a quite interesting history, not history, or idea of collaborating, because you are not only Cubit in the same building, but you have 2HP also, and some other brands, yeah?
Yeah, so we have a pretty big collaborative effort out of our workspace. So we do all of our manufacturing in-house, and we get to share that capabilities with quite a few other companies.
And you are more focusing on digital stuff, I think.
Yeah.
Why comes this idea putting more effort to digital area than analog, for example?
So we wanted to take a lot of the unique techniques that became possible in computers in the last 10 to 20 years and put it in the hardware world. And Modular is really a perfect environment for experimental techniques because people are trying to find new sounds. And in our minds, there was no better way to find these new sounds than with high-speed digital processors. And so we kind of wanted to provide a unique take on Modular and bring focus on digital and bring all these unique things that have never existed with voltage control and bring it into that world.
And do you think it's well accepted by the community that you take a different angle of it than all other companies, for example? Because I think your modules have a very special design, and you also with the new modules, I think it's also quite interesting, a different angle on it, yeah?
Yeah, no, we always try and provide a fresh take. We don't want to just rehash things that we've seen a million times in the past. We want to push synthesis forward rather than just create things that we think were popular in the past, so they'll be popular now. We want to push the envelope and really keep things fresh.
Is it for you as developer more difficult to find the right way in digital to make them accessible, the parameters, than you think in an analog module? Because in digital you can have thousands of parameters and thousands of options. What is your design language there?
So it is always a struggle because when you are in a digital world, you have infinite capability, but you don't want to give the user every choice, and you don't want to create these really dense pages of menus and things like that. So the struggle is, what are the most important parameters? What should we put dedicated on knobs, and what should we hide in submenus? And we try and find a balance while being full-featured and yet easy to use at the same time. And so that's always what we spend a lot of our UI time on, is what makes us intuitive, easy to use, but still deep.
Because I see a lot of amazing modules in the Eurorack world, but thousands of submenus.
Yeah.
They are not usable.
Right.
And I think you are avoiding this in your concepts.
We're trying to, and in our minds, the important thing is to make sure it's more fun and accessible and easy to use than a computer. And so if it's less fun to use than a keyboard and a mouse, why are we doing it, right? And so if we don't have a great interface and these nice tactile, intuitive, easy to use controls, why not just have people use laptops? And so that's what we try and keep that in our mind and make sure that, hey, it's fun, it's easy, and yet it's still full-featured, but that doesn't detract from the intuitiveness.
Is Cubit Electronix your first company, or you learned electronics or developing already in other synthesizer companies?
It's my first company. We started at the right time, and glad to still be here after all this time.
And how many people are you in the company?
In total, we have around, covers around 20 employees total.
That's quite impressive already for such a quite young company.
Yeah.
And how would you call your biggest success? I think was the Nebulae, or where you raised the most interest in.
Yeah, that was our first module. Was the Nebulae V1, and people really were excited about it. It resonated with them, which was a great thing for us, and we just kept going from there.
But it's the first Nebulae is based on Raspberry Pi, I think.
Correct. But the new one is as well.
As well. Okay.
Yeah, both the Nebulae V1 and V2 use the Raspberry Pi.
What makes it so easy or interesting to use Raspberry Pi instead of auto electronics?
What's really exciting about the Raspberry Pi is you can actually code in these high-level languages like C Sound or Pure Data, which already have these huge DSP libraries and these amazing techniques, but you don't have to write that code. You can borrow it from them and just slot it into your product to focus on making it a good instrument. And so that's, for us early on, that's what was really powerful and still is really powerful about the Raspberry Pi, is it offers all this pre-made stuff so you can focus on what really matters, which is the instrument design, not so much the nitty-gritty of the hardware, because someone else already did that.
You have new stuff on NAMM Show 2020. I think a lot of new modules.
4 new modules.
That's quite a lot.
Yeah, it is.
And I see you have again your playroom here.
Yes. Yeah.
How is it? Does it have a name on it? Or does it have a name?
It does not have a name. We should give it a name. That's a good idea. Every year people ask us about it, and we don't know what to call it. Arcade machine, people like to call it, you know.
So what is the idea behind? Because is to give it users that they can play with it, or?
So the idea is we really wanted to create something that accentuated how cool the interface of Modular was and make it a little more inviting to people walking by. Because we found in our first couple of years at NAMM, we'd have a Eurorack system out, but people would kind of they'd be afraid to touch it. So they didn't want to mess up the patch, they didn't want to do anything. So what we thought we would do is just create this cool system and close it in this unique, fun thing and give you all these controls so people can come around and play with it. They don't feel scared, you know, it's really inviting.
I think that's a big problem still in Modular, in such fairs like Supermove or NAMM show. People have fear to touch something or to remove a cable or so.
It's daunting, it's a scary world to get into if you're not familiar with it.
But if you take a cable away, you're obsessed, I think. But for NAMM 2020, you have four new modules?
Yeah, all on the top here. So we have the Surface, which is a multi-timbral physical modeling voice. The Data Bender, which is a circuit-bent audio buffer. The Aurora, which is a spectral reverb. And the Cascade, which is a ratcheting envelope generator. So it's a multi-timbral physical modeling voice. What's really cool is you can have a number of unique models or algorithms, and you can switch between them dynamically. So right now we're listening to our plug string model. You're gonna get guitars, basses, things of that nature. So you move it up. Now we have our mallet section. And this is gonna be things like vibes and marimba, anything you'd use a mallet for in an orchestra section. Next we have the kick drum, tom-tom drums. You're gonna get this tuned drum sounds, but not noisy snare sounds. And then lastly, the noisy snare sounds. So you can get things like snare drums, things of that nature. What's also really exciting is you can have up to 8 voices active at a time. So if we just increase this here, we have 8 voices now, and you can allocate any of these voices from any of the models. So it sounds like you have 4 or more modules making sound, but you only have 1. So with a little CV, it just...
Is that physical modeling is quite a relative unknown territory in Eurorack?
Right.
Is that a problem, or is it processing power, or what do you need to make it?
So the firmware is very complex. The DSP code is not easy to write, and there's not a lot of example code. And so the key is having that knowledge of the DSP and the firmware is what enables good physical modeling modules.
Okay. So, and the data bender is an 8-bit oscillator, or?
So it's a digital audio buffer. So it's sort of like a glitch effects box. It's really unique. You can have up to a 5-minute stereo audio buffer, but what's really cool is the ways that you can warp the sound. So we bring up our mix right now. Time is like the size of your buffer, and then repeats is how much of it you're playing back. You get some unique glitch effects, but where it gets really cool is when you activate the bend, the break, or the corrupt features. And so the bend is sort of like an old tape machine. It's going to speed up and slow down, play backwards, forwards. Break is going to be like a skipping CD or a scratch record. It's going to disjointedly move around the buffer. Get some clicks and pops and some stuttering. And then corrupt is going to be sort of like firmware bugs, buffer underruns, downsampling, bit crushing, things like that. So pretty wild. Between these 3 features, you can get a really wide range of textures and sounds.
And we have Aurora?
Yeah. So Aurora is a spectral reverb. What's really cool about it is not only is it a really beautiful, lush reverb, but it has a phase vocoder inside, allowing for these spectral transformations of your audio. So if you bring up the mix here, really lush hall reverb. When you bring time all the way on top, it'll go forever. It'll just keep reverberating on itself. But what's really cool is the spectral functionality here. So the warp knob is going to do these weird warping sounds in the background of your audio, sort of like pitch shifting, but spectral one. Beneath that, we have the blur, which is going to smear the transients and the spectral content into like a mulch. We have reflection, which is basically a spectral low-pass filter. And then atmosphere is our sort of the reflections. And then what's really cool too is you can actually lock the reverb in the time or the frequency domain, and it'll just keep going with a gate input as well.
Can you create some specific reverbs with it? So
you can do some of the classic ones. You can do like Hall or Shimmer or things like that. But yeah, of course you can achieve the some of your standard reverbs, but it really excels when it morphs into these other ones.
Can be these parameters saved somewhere? If you have a specific reverb and you want to recall it, is there a recall feature inside, or is it just instant to change it?
Yeah, no, that is a great question. Right now it does not do that, but between now and when we release, I'm sure we can squeeze that into the firmware. Yeah, that's a really good suggestion.
Okay. And the Cascade is?
The Cascade's a ratcheting envelope generator. Basically what it does is it takes the concept of burst generation and applies it to envelopes. So you trigger it, and then you set the number of repeats, and it will repeat the envelope that many times. It's also capable of being, in addition to being an AD envelope, it can be ADSR, ASR, or a bouncy ball mode, where it'll do the classic bouncy ball patch where it speeds up and slows down, mimicking gravity on a basketball or something. It also has cycling mode, so it'll just run on its own. You can set your attack and decay parameters. 2 outputs. They can be identical, inverted, or a unique combination between the two. And you can set the amplitude of each one between 0 and 10 volts. And then lastly, the freeze functionality, which just locks the output of the envelope right where it is. And there's a trigger input for that as well.
Okay. And these modules will be available only in black interfaces?
Black and silver.
And silver.
Yeah. All Cubit modules are available in silver as well.
Okay, and when we can expect them?
So the Surface will be the first one out in March. It is 10 HP wide. It's going to retail for $299. The Data Bender will be available in May. It's 14 HP. It's going to be $349 retail. The Aurora is 10 HP. It's going to be available in April. It's going to be $299. And then the Cascade is 10 HP. It'll be available in June, and it's going to retail for $199.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. And one last question. Eurorack in 2020. What do you expect? How the market will grow? Because we have now analog clones, we have digital modules. How it goes further? Or are we already on the stage on the Eurorack where there's still space for many more modules and many more ideas?
Well, I think there's always going to be space for more ideas in Eurorack, because one of its core tenets has always been we want new sounds, we want new techniques. So while the rest of the industry might be, rehashing a lot of old concepts, Eurorack never stays stagnant, and the users are always pushing for new ideas and new designs. So I think the sky's the limit. The interest in Eurorack has never been stronger because people want new sounds. They want to introduce these new elements into their songwriting, their compositions, their production, whatever type of music they're making. So it's only going to get bigger from here, and I think Eurorack is in a really amazing spot.
Okay, so I'm looking forward for next year's of Cubit Electronix. He surprised us every year with some very cool modules. Also the Bloom sequencer, which is an amazing module.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wish you a good NAMM show 2020.
Likewise.
Like the next 2 days, and a good year 2020 also.
Yeah.
So big thanks for watching, and hope to see you very soon in one of the next videos. Bye.